Hi guys, this is Heather from the Little Black Sheep Shop on Etsy, and I'm going to walk you through a quick tutorial on how to make my version of Eleven's dress from Stranger Things. The sewing pattern and step-by-step instructions to make this dress are available in my shop on Etsy. I also have a separate video that shows you how to do the smocking on the front of her dress, and you can find the link to that video below. So we're going to start with the front of the bodice, which has 3 pattern pieces. This pattern features princess seams down the bust line. These are curved seams, so at first it may seem like they're not going to match up, or one piece is too long for the other, but I promise they will. So an easy way to pin is by pinning first at each notch mark, and then at the beginning and end of each seam. The key to curved seams is not being afraid to pin, especially with larger bust lines. You'll see here I've used about 9 pins, and this is for an extra small AB cup. Once you've stitched these seams, it's important to press them open, and if you have a tailor's ham, this is going to be a lot easier. You can do it with an ironing board, no problem. It's just going to take a little bit longer. After this, with any curved seam, you're actually going to want to notch or cut little slices into the seam allowance along that curved edge, and this just allows for that seam to sit nice and flat. So the front of our bodice is actually complete, and now we'll move on to the back. So you have the back center pieces, and along that curved edge, you're going to want to do a stay stitch. This is a long basting stitch, and all it does is to ensure the piece doesn't actually warp when you're stitching the side piece to it. So now you're going to pin again using the notch, the top and bottom, pin in between, and then once you stitch it, go ahead and press those seams open. Now we're going to attach the back pieces to the bodice front along the shoulder line. Press that open, and then we're also going to attach it along the side seams, and you'll want to press those open as well. Once you do this, the bodice actually is completely finished, and we're going to be moving on to the next piece. In order to prepare for that, all you have to do is do a long stay stitch along the collar line. This is again a long basting stitch. It just helps to keep everything in place when we go to actually stitch the collar onto the bodice. Now it's time to stitch together the collar, and we're going to do a long stitch along the curved edge and leave that open edge unstitched so that we can actually turn it inside out. Depending on your fabric, you may need to also do some trimming and notches along that edge. Now we're going to tack the collar together at the 2 dots right in the center, and we're going to do another basting stitch all the way around. This is going to help to again keep those curved seams in place, keep everything from warping once we attach it to our bodice. So at this point you can lay your collar on top of your bodice and match up your notch points and any other marks that you have all the way around and pin it in place securely. Once you've run that through your sewing machine, you can go ahead and move on to the bodice lining. Since those are the exact same instructions for the bodice, I won't be covering them here. You can just follow along from earlier. Once you've sewn your bodice lining, there is an additional step to prep before you attach it to the rest of your bodice. And for this step, you can always stitch a guide line before you press it. I've done that here, so you can see all along the bottom I just have a simple guideline stitch. And once I have that in place, I can just go ahead and turn that lower hem up and press it into place so that that will stay nice and secure, and you'll have a nice finished bodice lining. So now we're going to attach our lining to our bodice, and you'll start with your bodice right side up, and then place your lining down on top, right side down. So you're going to have right sides of the fabric together, and then you'll start matching up your marks all along that neckline once again. Make sure you pin it really well, and then you'll take it to your machine and stitch. Once you've got that all in place, you can go ahead and turn the lining to its proper side, and you'll do what's called an understitch. This is a stitch that essentially attaches the seam allowance to the lining It's done very, very close to the other seam, and you'll see that once you actually turn that lining inside the garment after you've done an understitch, you can trim it along that line. It's really, really secure, and that lining won't slip up out of place once the garment is finished and someone is wearing it. So the next step is to prepare the armholes for the sleeves. And this is just going to attach the bodice lining to the bodice front so it stays nice and securely in place when we go to attach the sleeves later. You'll just go ahead and match up all of your marks and then run it through your sewing machine nice and slowly, and we'll be moving on to the sleeves. So for the sleeves, we're going to start by stitching a long ease stitch between the marked notches along the cap of the sleeve by the shoulder line. And then we're going to go ahead and just stitch up the sides. You're going to run this through your machine once at your seam allowance, and then again a 1/4 inch away from that initial stitch line. And then you can go ahead and trim the excess and press that seam towards the back of the sleeve. Next, we're going to go ahead and add a gather stitch along the marked lines at the bottom of the sleeve, and you can do this and then we'll come back to that in a moment. You'll want to go ahead and prepare your sleeve cuffs just by folding them right sides together, running that through your sewing machine, and then going ahead and pressing that seam open. Once you've done that, you can fold them so that the right sides are facing out, wrong sides are together. Now we're going to go back to that gathering stitch that you did. The idea here is to pull the tails of the thread so that it actually gathers just enough so that you can ease that cuff over the top. You'll want to do that evenly. Once you have it gathered the way you want it, you're going to slide the cuff on with the open side facing out so that the raw edges are together. And then you'll go ahead and find the seam, pin right there. You'll also have the center point of the sleeve and the center point of the cuff marked, so you can pin along that side as well. And then just pin intermittently in between. Stitch it once and then flip the cuff over once and over again, and then stitch it in place. Now we're going to go to that second gathered stitch, pull that evenly, and then do a zigzag top stitch to secure that in place. Now we're going to pull the tails of that thread that we stitched earlier along the cap of the sleeve. I like a little bit of a gathered sleeve for this project. And then it's time to attach the sleeve to the bodice. For this step, you're going to want to turn the bodice inside out, slide the sleeve into place, and then pin it using all of the marks and guidelines. Once you've attached both sleeves, the top of this dress is complete. The only thing left to do is to work on the skirt and add either a zipper or buttons. So for the skirt, the first step is going to be to attach the skirt front to the skirt back. You'll want to press both of these seams open. The next step involves stitching a long gathering stitch along the top of the skirt. And you can see I've skipped the seams, the side seams for this, and I've also overlapped them along the center mark of the front of the skirt. This leaves me with about 4 long stitch lines to work with, and I use upholstery thread so that it doesn't break. So before we attach our skirt to the bodice, we actually need to prepare the bodice first. So you'll want to get the lining out of the way. The lining is actually not going to be attached to the skirt. It will just be floating free within the bodice. You'll want to mark your side seams. Just take note of where those are, because those are where the seams of the skirt should be pinned into place. So you'll have one on the right and one on the left, and you'll want to go ahead and pin those. You also want to pin the approximate center of the bodice to the center of the skirt front, and make sure that you have a pin securely in place there. Once you have your pins in place, then you're going to take the tails of your threads and start pulling. This is going to gather the skirt, and you'll want to keep pulling from either side until you have it gathered all the way across that area so that it matches the exact length between the pins. So you'll see over here, I've got my pin in place on the right, my pin in place on the left, and then I've gathered all the way in between and just pinned as I went. Once you've done that, you can just do a basting stitch, and then you'll do a regular stitch along your actual seam allowance. And you can go back and do a second stitch if you'd like. This is going to be nice and secure, and then trim any excess. The only thing left to do is to add a lightweight fusible interfacing for your buttons or zipper, your choice. I would recommend going with an invisible zipper for this project. It's a lot easier to add and it gives a really professional finish. Once you have your closure in place, all you have to do is sew up the back portion of the skirt and then hem the bottom of the skirt to whatever length works for you. And there you have it, a finished dress. I'm going to go ahead and leave links below to the sewing pattern, which includes step-by-step detailed instructions, and also a link to the smocking tutorial, which was done in a separate video. Thank you so much.